Good morning and happy Wednesday, folks. William Tramp here, also known as This FNGN, and I'm here to talk to you about Encounter Party. Encounter Party Episode 5 aired last night on Dungeons & Dragons Adventures Network, the Dungeons & Dragons Adventures Network, which can be found on Plex and Freevee. I want to share with you today my thoughts on this episode. I'm going to review it, I'm going to tell you my thoughts that are good, I'm going to tell you my thoughts that weren't so good, and then I'm going to tell you my theories about the show. Now, because I'm going to be going through a lot of information here, I should give a disclaimer. There's going to be spoilers. There's going to be spoilers galore. I'm going to basically tell you everything that happened in the episode last night that I can remember. So make sure that you understand that this is going to be filled with them spoilers, all right? So if you don't want a spoiler-filled video, go ahead and check out this video right here. It's one that I wrote about the sucker punch fallacy. I like creating weird videos. Anyway, all right, let's go ahead and create this video. We're gonna get started here, so hit it, Tommy! Are we still doing this bit? Aren't we kind of beating a dead horse here with this bit? I don't think so. This week's episode, The Sea Monster, begins with the group having a battle on the Cherry Wind's deck. The group had just witnessed Marcus Tim announce to his crew to start shooting cannonballs. I think it's cannonballs. Yeah, it's cannonballs, right? I could polish my cannon, right? Okay. Down on the Tabaxi merchant who is trying to escape. And as the group goes to confront Tim about this, Pajaric, who no longer is wearing the vestments of his Ilmater faith, has stepped in, and the group is starting to realize that maybe one of these two is possessed by the creature. So we launch into combat. Olivina begins with a 1-2 punch of poison spray from her and then some wild swipes from Olred. We then have Asher, who rushes to the captain's door and starts banging on it, demanding that Ignis Epsilon come and help, but there's no response. Remember, Ignis Epsilon is actually on the lower deck, and there's a magical portal, but that may not transfer sound. That's okay. Then launches in towards Pajaric and uses his Fighter Battle Master maneuver to knock him prone. Then we have David, by the way, stops for a moment and gives my very favorite DM tip. It's true. You can see it right here. But the tip overall is roll your damage dice and your attack dice at the exact same time. It saves a little bit of trouble because if you succeed on your attack roll, you're going to have to roll the damage anyway. If you fail on your attack roll, okay, all you've lost is rolling an extra dice at the same time. Anyway, Flick starts to cast a spell, Whispering Clicks, and it's Dissonant Whispers, which is a bard spell, but it's also a great old one warlock spell. Ooh. Pajaric is able to save against that, so we move on to Dridian. Dridian is starting to wonder whether or not attacking Pajaric is the best idea. This is probably exacerbated by the fact that Brian, the DM, continues to point out that he's kind of sickly and you're just going to attack this guy. So he casts Shield of Faith on himself and then attempts to cast Turn the Faithless. Turn the Faithless is a Oath of the Ancients paladin ability that basically will cause certain creatures to remove themselves from the situation, typically Fae or Fiend. And we learn through the casting or through the use of this ability, sorry, it's not a spell, so it's not casting, that there is no Fae or Fiend nearby. So whatever the possession creature is, it is neither Fae nor Fiend, so we don't know what it is. Or maybe it's just not on deck. So Tolo teleports in, Wild Magic Barbarian, and not wanting yet to harm Pajaric because he doesn't understand fully what's going on here, grabs onto Pajaric to try to wrestle him down and kind of hold him until they can figure out what's going on. Well, Pajaric has an answer to that. He looks at Marcus Tim, tells him to flee, and then casts a spell over him. Marcus Tim, in return, starts to rush downstairs, yelling for the captain. I'm starting to suspect that maybe Marcus Tim might be the one who is possessed. There's a lot more combat that goes through. That was kind of the first round there of things that happen. I don't think it'd be super interesting if I go round by round through every single bit of the combat, but here are kind of the highlights. The group splits up with a few of them, namely Flick, and then going downstairs to deal with Tim. You've got Dridian still trying to get into the captain's quarters. He moves over to trying to get into the captain's quarters to get to Ignis Epsilon, and then you have Tolo, Olivina, and Asher trying to deal with Pajaric. It's what some highlights that happen here. Tolo at one point actually grabs Pajaric and throws him over the edge of the ship, which is fantastic. But Pajaric reveals that maybe they're not a cleric after all and casts fly to ensure that they do not get lost in the water. We learned that the spell he had originally cast, by the way, on Marcus Tim was Sanctuary, which caused Marcus Tim to be able to block a number of blows. When Vin and Flick went down to stop Marcus Tim from getting to the captain, Tim ends up, creating some sort of frighten effect on Flick and some sort of paralyzation effect on Vin. And then we see Marcus Tim's true self when the being inside of Marcus Tim, because Marcus Tim was possessed, leaps from the first mate into Vin. Well, meanwhile, up on the top of the deck, Dridian does manage to get into the captain's quarters and gets to to Ignis Epsilon, not to Marcus, gets to Ignis Epsilon, while the other three manage to pull Pajaric back onto the ship and then absolutely destroys the Dragonborn spellcaster with a ridiculous amount of fire. Nice one, Asher. Dridian starts to fill in Ignis Epsilon as to what's going on. And the rest of the group then decides to try to stop the now possessed Vin. It is about at this point that the group kind of overwhelms them, and the DM calls for the end of combat. Oh, one more highlight. Flick cast Heroism. Heroism isn't really a warlock spell, so I think that may have thrown out my theory on that. With combat over, the group devises a plan along with Ignis Epsilon. They decide that they are going to attune to portions of the ship to help the captain get the ship to the astral plane, because the being inside of Vin now wishes just to go home. At least this is what they're able to deduce. So they get to the astral plane, and the creature leaves Vin. I don't know why I always do this. It comes out of his mouth, I guess. And heads home. And the group comes back to the material plane and are able now to sail on. One point of interest is that Vin, kind of getting over the possession, kind of mentions that he felt like he was trapped inside of a glass bottle inside of himself with someone else, which I thought was just a delightful way to explain that. And also says to Tolo, hey, I knew you would be here, which is what a lovely little bond that they are creating. Well, it doesn't take long for the group to reach their destination, Baldur's Gate, and here we get some heartfelt goodbyes from each members of the group, because remember, they don't know each other. They only met each other on this ship and were connected by that strange dream that they had. Then checks on Flick to make sure Flick isn't still blind, which Flick is, but Flick assures him that he will be okay. So Vin stoically takes up his pack and heads off into the city. Flick, for his part, seems to feel very confident about his next steps, because Baldur's Gate is his home. So he blindly runs off into a city that he knows very well. Dridian, for his part, looks over the great city of Baldur's Gate and reminds himself that he does not wish to be here, and he seems kind of hesitant for a moment. Then he says something kind of odd. He says, "You've got this, kid," and then heads off into the city. I'm kind of wondering about that. Is he talking to himself as a kid, or I don't know. That's kind of an interesting thing. Asher, on the other hand, kind of steals herself by kind of scanning the city, and then seemingly finds her destination, and then just zooms off towards it. Olavina and Olred and Tolo are the last remaining on the ship. Olavina is spending her time comforting herself by comforting Olred. It's actually kind of a really sweet moment, and through her trying to steal her owlbear for what's to come, she mentions that hopefully they'll be able to see her parents soon. So, that's pretty interesting. And they head off. The episode ends with Tolo getting a hint of a scent on the wind, orange blossom honey. He begins to laugh and proclaims that he has found her, proclaiming that this whole wide world could not hide you from me. And he runs off into the city, elated to have potentially found someone who's been missing to him for quite some time. And that is the end of the episode. That's the end of the first arc, the boat arc. We have seen our first story told in this show, and I'm loving it. Well, let me go ahead and be more specific about things that I thought were good about this episode, things that I thought were not so good about this episode, and give you my theories for what's to come. What did I love about this episode? Well, first of all, I love that we got an arc here. We have a nice kind of a nice end here, but with the full knowledge that there's still more to come. I thought it was a great starter adventure. I get a little tired of the you start in a tavern, go ahead and just info dump who you are. So this was a neat little adventure, and frankly, I hope Brian, the DM, gives us the ability to like see how this adventure is run, like maybe by releasing it as something that we can purchase. I'd buy it. I'd love to try running it at my table. Then giving the pro tip, of course I like that. Of course I did, because I do an advice channel on here, and so it just made me happy to see the camera stop for a second as David looks at the camera and says, "Hey, try this." Oh, love it. Okay, so the camera effects were a lot of fun, especially when Tolo announces using his wild magic and he ends up teleporting. Like the camera gets really fun, and then the lights were really fun. The production value again is just great on this. Again, if I could have flashing lights or haze effects that I could cause over my players without filling my my house with like a fog machine or buying a ridiculous amount of lights, I would totally do it. So a little bit jealous of what you guys of what they have there, but it's very cool. It's very entertaining. Brian guilting them all about attacking Pajark was one of my favorite things. Throughout the entire combat, he guilts them by pointing out that they're attacking this sickly cleric, and I just thought that was really funny because that's a move as a DM I like to pull, because you gotta have your own little bit of fun. You gotta make have players question what's happening, and make sure that they aren't just charging in all murder hobo like. So I thought that was delightful. Honestly, the goodbyes were fantastic. It was a great way to really get a feel for these characters, just a quick role-playing moment. Of course, my wife was in particular in tears over Olavina's goodbye by talking to Ulrich, and also Tolo. She and I were both like watching Tolo's just exuberance, and I find Carrie Payton's energy just infectious. So, what was the okay? Well, I thought, this is just the nature of the system that they're playing, combined with the episode lengths in general. The combat took up a ton of the episode, so as a result, the releasing the being into the astral plane when the ship jumped to the astral plane to release and then jump back, it felt a little rushed. But that's just the nature of what they're doing here. You can only cut down D&D combat so much to where it still takes a fair amount of time, and they've got like 48 minutes to make the episode. So that's not on them. It's just it's a limitation of the medium that they are choosing to use. I think it was a good idea though to instead of allotting a lot of time to goodbye of the astral creature and then shortening the goodbyes, I thought it was a good idea that they decided to lengthen the amount of time that we got on the goodbyes, because in the end, as much as it would be cool to have a prolonged goodbye scene with the entity from the astral plane, I think it was more important that we got that moment with the characters, because that's who we're going to be following next. I assume episode 6 could just be all about the adventures of the creature in the astral plane, but I'm pretty sure it's not. Points of interest, questions that I would love to have answered. Number 1, okay, so if Flick is casting spells that warlocks don't have, did he maybe take a feat or some ability? He's still a warlock and still all a big, maybe he's not, maybe he is a bard, but he isn't actually a rogue, right? Maybe he just has the thief background or something, the criminal background, and that's where he gets his rogue abilities. Maybe. I don't know. But that heroism, threw off my theory. I'm still going to hold on hope. The Dragonborn Pajark. What was the deal with the Dragonborn Pajark? It seemed to be protecting Tim, but not even necessarily Tim, the entity. And at first, we thought he was a cleric of Ilmater of some sort, or a worshiper of Ilmater, but I don't think that's the case, obviously. I also kind of wonder, what sort of spellcaster has both Fly and Sanctuary, but I don't know. I kind of want to know more about Pajark, but I don't think we're going to learn any more about Pajark. That is that situation is pretty well and over. Gibrash, what happened with Gibrash? We never really got to understand kind of what happened around Gibrash and his brother. That was sort of left behind. The Zentarum on the ship. We never really got a full resolution as to what happened to the halfling Zentarum that sort of disappeared. But maybe that might come up later. I don't really know. Obviously, A bunch of questions about the characters, right? Olivina, what's her parents are in Baldur's Gate. What's the deal? What's been keeping her from them? What did Asher see in the city that she is zeroing in on? How does Flick know the city so well that he can navigate it blind? Then didn't really give me a question to ask when he walked off into the city. He just kind of was a stoic human and walked on. Why doesn't Dridian want to be in Baldur's Gate? I'm curious on that. Why doesn't Dridian want to be there? Other than, clearly nature-oriented elf, going into a big, disgusting, smog-filled city, right? I'm not saying that that's how Baldur's Gate is described, but I would say from an elven perspective, that's probably how it would feel, in my personal opinion. And, of course, Tolo. Like, who is Tolo after, right? I am so curious to about these characters and to see how their stories start to unfold within the city. I'm curious to see how they come back together. Obviously, we need to know if that dream was just a dream or a premonition of sorts, or we got to know what's happening there. I want to know what's going to unfold, and I'm curious if anything from the Cherry Wind is going to fold into that other than just the characters, right? Like, is this, we've got 22 episodes to go, or like 22 episodes total. We've only gone through 5 the first arc, so we've got a fair amount of episodes to go. So I'm looking forward to seeing how all of this turns out. I really like this show. We've gotten through the first arc, and I'm going to say it's worth it. It's worth the watch, and I'm going to keep watching, and I'm going to keep doing these reviews on it because I think it's fun to watch. All right, well, hey, that's it. That's all I had to say today. Thank you so much for being here for my review of episode 5 of Encounter Party. I really hope to see you next Wednesday when I come back to talk about the first episode of what I believe will be the next arc. The next episode is going to air December 12th of 2023 at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dungeons & Dragons Adventure Network, which can be found on Freevee or Plex. These episodes, by the way, are on demand now, so you can go back and watch the previous episodes, so you no longer have to just be there on Tuesday night to watch it as they get released. I think it has like a day or two before the episode releases and then gets onto the on-demand part, but hey, way easier to watch this now. Hopefully that means people will still watch my reviews. It's okay if they don't. I'm just doing this for my own edification. Anyway, again, thank you so much for being here. Also, if you wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button or hitting that like button, that helps me out. This isn't necessarily about me, but it's kind of about, I'm going to make it about me for a second. If you wouldn't mind hitting that like or subscribe button, that really helps me out, helps get the word about my channel out. Also, if you are so inclined, I do have a Patreon, which the link is in the thing below. That if you gave to it, that would be cool. If you don't, I'm not going to have any hard feelings about it. So, okay, my own personal shilling aside, I will see you all next Wednesday.